Welcome to Mavericks and Pioneers podcast, where I've already botched it.
I love it.
Welcome to Mavericks and Pioneers podcast, where I don't know why I just did this.
I'm still laughing at you going, I've never done a podcast, but I'm going to host it.
He was supposed to host, for the record. This is not my idea.
This is so much fun. It comes from the heart.
It does.
Not the head.
That's right. Okay. Well, guys, we're doing it. I'm super excited to be here today. Thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited. We've got a new podcast here for you. This is Mavericks and Pioneers, and our whole heart is to empower entrepreneurs and aspiring entrepreneurs to pursue their dreams. And so I'm your host. My name is Stephen Gillum. This is your co-host, CJ McPhail. And we have a very special guest with us. I'm super excited to have him with us today. But before we introduce him, wanted to give CJ just an opportunity to share his heart for Mavericks and Pioneers, and we'll go from there.
This is so cool. I'm so excited.
I'm very excited.
So glad to have you too, Eric. Listen, Mavericks and Pioneers is kind of like a 3-year dream of Stephen and I's. And we didn't know what we were going to call it until recently, but that's what it is. And it's this opportunity for us to do what God's gifted us to do naturally. And that is inspire, motivate, pour ourselves into men and women of any age, from any background, for any reason, that want to go further, that want to go deeper, that want to take on risk but are afraid, that want to not allow money to stop them but don't know how, that want to live a life of legacy but haven't ever seen that really modeled or know what that looks like exactly. So they're just struggling, and they're in this place, and what's so much fun is they're so close. They're like right there. They just don't know it yet.
So good.
And if I could define Mavericks and Podcast from one angle, there's going to be 1,000 of these angles. It's really that we have this opportunity to speak into that space. And for those people that are already entrepreneurs, because that's the other half of this, it's the opportunity to say, you know, the proverbial statement, what got you here may not be what gets you there.
Come on.
So if you're leaning too much on this past and these great things that you've done, and we admire it, what does it look like to move forward with something new? And what is that conversation going to be like? And the answer is, right now, we don't know exactly, but we're going to sit with them and sit with you in that place. And that is this podcast, Mavericks and Pioneers, and what brings it together.
So good. And one thing, CJ, you always say that I love is, like, at the end of the day, you know what we're really looking for is meaningful action.
Yeah.
We want to see people actually step out of the boat, man, and to pursue their dreams. So we've talked a lot of theory. We have a lot of ideas. How can we get you moving? How can we equip you? How can we help you?
Yes.
So I mentioned earlier we have a guest with us, Mr. Eric Johnson, the man, the myth, the legend.
The guy who's not the host.
Yes.
I'm sitting with two hosts.
That's right. I love it.
So true.
The anti-host.
The anti-host, but somehow still the most special. But we're super honored that you would agree to join us, man, for these first 8 weeks, and just wanted to give you an opportunity to share your heart for entrepreneurship and kind of what's going on at studio and the like.
Yeah, it's great. First of all, it's great to be here. Great to be with you guys.
Yeah.
And it's fun to see this, all of our separate journeys and kind of converging and just seeing what's happened already. So Heart for Entrepreneurs really comes with from a young childhood, my fascination with the idea that you can have an idea and actualize it. Just that whole process, just the ability to imagine something. I have this thought of the lost art of imagination. Like, we have lost our ability to imagine and ideate. Yeah. And so I'm really intrigued with seeing people imagine again and ideate again. One of the expressions of that is entrepreneurship, creativity. I mean, all these different expressions. So for me, the heart for entrepreneurship really originates from, we as humans, God has given us material, the ability to ideate and think of something. And it's getting us to how do we actually move into and actualize them, like you were just saying. So the heart behind it for me is seeing people, because one thing that we've talked about recently is just in our environment here, the amount of ideas just feels, I don't know, disproportionate in the amount of ideas. Yeah. Like, there's not a lack of ideas. It's like there are so many ideas flowing around in the hearts of people that we're running with and doing life with.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what's like, there's a frequency here on this thing of idea. Yeah. And the idea of, okay, how do we keep saying the word idea? The idea of the idea. But the idea really is to how do we create a space and to help people move into these ideas. And some of them are meant to affect economies. Some of them meant their own livelihoods, and some of them just have a deep impact on humanity and the future of humanity. So I'm a huge fan of that. And so being a part of any conversation around that, sign me up. I'm in. Let's go.
I love that.
That's why I'm here.
Do you mind just telling our viewers about founders and creators and kind of your heart for that and how we all got connected in that way? Because we're really using that course to springboard this podcast. So tell us about that a little bit.
And I expect some royalty checks, in
of
the
course,
years to come.
Naturally.
I'm kidding.
1 cent a year.
It's going to be
I have
big.
a 50% royalty rate. So
sure. It's only
keep that
fair.
in mind.
It's only fair.
No, but in all seriousness, we sat down a number of months ago.
Yeah.
And I was saying, hey, there's kind of a few areas that I would love some help in relation to studio and the community. Yeah. And one of them was particularly this idea of how do we help entrepreneurs, people with all the creativity, ideas. And she said, well, let's do something. And I said, why don't we just build an 8-week course and let's start there. Let's just take a baby step. And so as we got closer, it was like, okay, what do we call this thing? So the words founders, creators, pioneers, mavericks, entrepreneurs, and there's one more word, I forget what it is.
Explorer.
Explorer. Yeah, explorer. Right. I don't want, because sometimes the word entrepreneur is an interesting word because you automatically think only business.
Yes.
Right.
Or only for profit, right? But they're the heart of a mind of an entrepreneur. So anyways, I think for us, like, okay, what are some words that kind of capture the overall essence of what we're going after? Yeah. So the phrase founders and creators came up with like, oh, that just covers so much. There's so many things that covers. And then obviously the subword. So that was the idea of that. And then obviously we started last night, and it was super fun.
So fun.
You guys crushed it.
Thank you.
But I think what was so fun too was seeing the amount of interest in this. And it's, there's certain things that you offer and there's good interest, but then there's certain things like, oh, the interest is really high. And just for the record, I think we had over 130 people in the room last night, which is a pretty significant sign up. And especially when your faith was
25.
Was it 15?
25.
I literally said, I think we're going to have 15 to 25 people. CJ was like, no, I'm telling you, it's going to be at least 70. And I was like, there's not a chance in where. And here we are, 130 people.
When you put your two numbers together, it's actually more
well,
like
and
that.
that's what it was additive.
Yeah.
It was, for sure.
That's a good point.
So I think the essence of it's an 8-week course that we're offering our people in the upstate of South Carolina. And obviously a lot of people at studio, but it's fun to see people from not studio. And that's obviously your heart, our heart.
Yes.
And that, I think once we 8 weeks get done, I think it'll springboard into numerous things. Obviously this podcast, you guys are going to run with this for however long you're going to.
For sure.
So anyway, that's the heart and that's kind of the essence of the idea behind founders and creators. I think for me, I have always felt there should be a beautiful intersection of faith and creativity.
Yes.
Faith and entrepreneurship. And rethinking faith in cities.
Yeah.
So that whole conversation, so for me, this is a part of that and contributing to moving the needle in that direction.
So good.
Rethinking faith in cities.
I know.
It's so fun. So it kind of it gets to pioneers in a way and mavericks. I mean, when you hear the phrase and the term mavericks and pioneers, I mean, what hits you? How do you define that? And how do you view that? Like in a kingdom context.
Yeah. It's interesting, the word mavericks, I mean, we have the definition of it. You looked it up and it's powerful. Yeah. But whenever I hear the word mavericks, I actually think there's a famous surf break on the West Coast, just south of San Francisco.
Okay.
And it's called Mavericks. And it's a world-class spot. Some of the world's largest waves come in, but it's seasonal. And so when certain storms, certain directions, when the conditions are right, all of a sudden this break appears, and these are massive waves. And the guys that ride these waves are half insane. They're half not all there.
Yeah, you have to.
They're risk takers. They literally are mavericks riding mavericks.
Yes.
I love
so
that.
there's something there that whenever I hear mavericks, I think of that.
Yeah.
And so I think the proper definition of maverick matches this surf break and the men and women that ride this wave, and they're all paddling, so they're not being towed in.
Dang.
And this wave, people have died at this break.
Wow.
So it's intense. So I think of people that are willing to take on the insurmountable, impossible situation and go for it.
Yeah.
And now, it all started with a couple guys that it was an off-the-radar spot. Now it's world-class. So it took a couple mavericks for this place to become known, for it to become almost normal in the surfing world.
Yeah.
So I think for me, a maverick is someone that's willing to go outside of what anybody thinks should happen and all of a sudden make it normal. So
Yeah.
I
So,
love
yeah.
that so much.
Do you think it's almost like you're giving someone permission, right?
Yeah.
It's like we always say in our business, you don't need permission. It's something we stamp on cups, and some people are like, "What do you mean?" Like it sounds negative, but what we mean is go.
Yeah.
Stop waiting on someone else. But at the same time, to be fair, on the flip side, it's the Mavericks of the world that show us like I can do it too. I mean, well, I don't know the data, and I didn't come ready to talk about this, but the first guy that broke the mile, what was it? Was it the
4-minute mile.
4-minute mile?
Yeah.
And no one had done it. And then in a short amount of time, forgive me for not knowing the details, I used to know this.
Yeah.
Like a bunch more people did it, and
Yes.
then everyone seems like
It's-
that's
yeah.
what they do.
Exactly.
But it took that guy to do it. Forgive me for not knowing his name to give him credit, but it took him to do that. And then suddenly, like everyone knows that it's possible.
Yeah.
So
exciting.
here we are in 2024, and there's so many things that I think we think from a technology perspective, and just how we think we've advanced as a culture, right? But yet we're hardly scratching the surface of the opportunities that are sitting in front of us. And I think for me, that's what gets me lit up about the idea of entrepreneurship. To your point, whether it's starting a business or perhaps it's starting a nonprofit or just doing something that feels daring to you, whatever that is, going and doing it so that you can become to live a little bit of that maverick lifestyle and just see what the Holy Spirit does inside your life as you start to live in that realm versus protection and safety and hiding.
Yeah.
Totally different conversation.
Yeah.
I love that. To me, I think of Joshua, and to me, like when I think Maverick, it's almost synonymous with courageous.
Yeah.
And I look out in the room, we started Founders and Creators last night, and I'm looking across to 130-ish people. And it's funny because as I was there, I could sense the courage and I could sense the hope. And I'm like, CJ, you always say, you are my people. These are my
Yes,
people. The
come
Mavericks,
on.
the ones that are
Yes.
willing to take the risk
Yeah.
to forge, in areas that people haven't been before. And then literally one of the participants came to me afterwards last night and she said that exact phrase. She said, I could feel the courage in the room.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what separates the entrepreneur from the average person in my mind.
Yeah.
It's being a risk taker. It's being willing to step out not knowing that it will succeed, because there's a reality to this thing. There is a dark side to entrepreneurship. People fail.
Yeah.
I've had failed business things. You have had failed business opportunities. I mean, it happens. But we've also experienced some success.
Yeah.
We've learned a heck of a lot along the way, and it's been so fun. It's such an unbelievably rewarding process. So anyway, that's my thought when I think about Mavericks.
Well, and real quick, that success for all three of us, it comes from the failure, right? It's a result of what we learned and how we grew, hopefully matured, sometimes more slowly than I wanted to. And then that's fun. So that's Maverick, Eric, which I love. What about Pioneer? Like, what hit you as you consider the concept of Pioneer, being a pioneer?
Yeah, Maverick had kind of this like, not in a negative sense, but like this bulldog. Like it's got like this force.
Yeah.
A Pioneer feels more like finesse.
Yeah.
Feels more like precise.
That's good.
More like defined.
That's good.
And I think they both can accomplish the same thing. So I think it's in the nuance for me.
Yeah.
And obviously someone may have a flip definition of this, but for me, a pioneer is someone that they are able to dream up what's actually possible and actually do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably that Maverick doesn't resonate with me personally. I think the word pioneer resonates with me more personally.
Wow.
And like it's almost like you can see the future.
Nice.
You can almost see like something that's not even in the tangible realm yet. It's something like it's almost like a superimposed reality on what you see. Like, oh, it doesn't exist, but it's right there.
Yeah.
So I think for me, a pioneer is it's almost like an augmented reality, and your whole life's mission is to make it an actual reality.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the essence I get with the pioneer. And I think that's probably the word that resonates with me. Like when I look out, what gets me up in the morning and what makes me excited about the future is like I can see a reality, and my goal is to I can make it real.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to see, whether it's my own life, my family, what we're doing in the studio, and just humanity in general.
Yeah.
So that's what the word pioneer that's where it hits me.
I love that you just said that, because it makes so much sense to me, like hearing you share your heart in that way. I told Eric a while back, I felt like God spoke to me and compared you to the lead character from The Greatest Showman. And I think I sent you a text about it.
Which is a great movie and a great soundtrack.
It is.
Incredible,
It's so
incredible
good.
movie,
I
great
love the
soundtrack. I mean, I literally, I was at the gym the other day and I was listening, you know, they had that second like remastered soundtrack. And so all these other artists are doing it. And I was listening to Zach Brown Band doing From Now On and literally weeping in the gym.
So
and so I'm
good.
like, you know, lifting weights and people looking at me like, is that guy okay? But nevertheless, there we were. But I was thinking about the song A Million Dreams from that soundtrack. And he talks about lying awake, you know, and imagining this world. And that is such a great picture for me when I think about what pioneers do is they stay awake at night. They have trouble falling asleep because they have all these dreams in their heart and they're going, somebody's got to forge a path. And I have the courage and I'll do whatever it takes to make this reality come to pass. So anyway.
You know what hits me, and I'm curious about to both of you. What do you think about this? An elephant in the room. And what some friends of mine have actually, I'll say, confessed to me that they struggled with, because a lot of friends in Lindsay and I's life look at us and go, we can never do what you do. They'll make statements like that. And I don't mean that's not to prop us up in any way, but just to say, like, you guys have started so many things and done so many things, and then you moved your family across the country, and, you know, that's not me. And that's interesting. That's an interesting thought. So are we all, can any of us be pioneers and Mavericks? Or is it a select few? Is it something you're born with? Is it, where do we go with that thought? Is it an excuse for people to go, hey, I don't do that because that's what you do. That's what you were gifted to do. That's not my gift. My gift's not being a Maverick, right? That's in 1 Corinthians somewhere, right? I don't know. Right. Or a pioneer. So what do you guys think about that? How does that roll?
I love that question. The first thing that came to my mind is, you know, obviously CJ. So part of what started this whole conversation for us is having the opportunity to meet with a bunch of businessmen.
Yeah.
And typically for me in my work week, I'll go out and get coffee. Maybe I get to meet with a guy for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And generally someone is looking for some type of advice or encouragement. And specifically as it relates to entrepreneurship, whether they're already a business owner or thinking about starting a business. Yeah. And the conversations are surprisingly repetitive. It's amazing how reoccurring the themes are.
That's good.
But I would say in the last 2 weeks alone, and this is both people that have attended or are attending Founders and Creators and those who are not. I think I've had 3 or 4 men say to me, you know, Stephen, I love this realm and I have great ideas and it's really exciting, but I'm just risk averse. I just am.
There it is.
And I just want to be like, yeah, me too. Yeah. You know, I literally said to a dear friend the other night, I was like, buddy, I am risk averse. Like, you don't understand, dude. This is not something that was innate to my character. This took practice. It was baby steps of risk at first. And then over time, that snowballs where you're willing to do some pretty courageous things because you've cultivated it. You know, it makes me think of David preparing for the giant, you know? Yeah. And so my personal opinion is the reason why people think I could never do that thing that you're doing is because they never took the first baby step. CJ, Stephen Gillum today can do a lot more than Stephen Gillum could 3 years ago. Yeah. You remember because you love to. Actually, can you tell the story? You know what I'm going to say. Yeah. Tell the story about the first time that we all hung out, and that'll help answer it. And then I want to hear Eric's thoughts.
Sure. Well, it's just not quite 3 years ago. We were at a breakfast spot in Greenville. Yeah. I had like my second or third week here and got introduced to you through a business group that we were, a small group that we were part of. Yes. And, dude, I just remember you were growing, but you were terrified. Yep. Things were starting to take off, but that taking off meant you're having to start making some big decisions, financially speaking, growth speaking. And one of those things was expanding into a bigger warehouse. Yes. This thing was, I don't remember the details and I don't know that it matters, but it was 2.5 times more a month or maybe more than that than what you were currently paying. And technically the revenue wasn't quite there. Like in that moment, that revenue didn't exist. So do you pull that trigger? Is that foolish? Or is it wise because you believe that expanding into that space is going to give you the revenue to launch you into the next realm of your business and phase of your business and all that? And yeah, dude, we were having that conversation and that tension. And I know we joke a lot, but in all seriousness, I had such a respect for you in that moment because we moved out here in a different context, but with a similar tension. I think people listening to this right now feel that tension. You know, they've done some things. Yep. And maybe it's worked and maybe it hasn't, but now what? What do I do with this? What do I do with this experience and these ideas? And that's where you were. And I'm so proud of you because you pulled the trigger. You
and
took
of course
that
it
space.
paid off.
And boy, did it.
Yeah. At the time, it seemed like the most terrifying thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I would say to that person that says, like, well, I could never do that. I'm like, if you're talking about the fear that you experience in stepping out, that journey is not something that ever ends as an entrepreneur. It's not like you take those first couple steps and like, okay, now I'm fear free. Now I'll never experience anxiety or
the fears
intimidation.
just get bigger.
They do.
In many ways, don't they?
And the risk, the
Yeah.
stakes are raised. It's like, okay, well, so that, let's say, I'm just going to make up some numbers for the sake of argument. In the beginning, you are risking $10,000. Well, what happens when you have to risk $200,000?
Right.
It's more scary.
Right.
I can promise you it's more scary. And so that at that time, I feel like racked with fear, but I had men around me who encouraged me, and we looked at the numbers and said, hey, I think you could do this. You ought to do it. And then, of course, the business has blown up. God's blessed us, which has been super fun.
Yeah.
But the idea of trying to do what we do now in that old space is laughable. I could never do it. We needed the new space. Yeah. So anyway, what's your thoughts?
No, it's a great question. My mind would go into Adam and Eve, first two humans on earth.
Yeah.
And when God said, gives him their commission. Yeah. So obviously they had to have the DNA of a maverick pioneer, whatever the right word would be, someone that's willing to, they're the first ones.
Yeah.
So, and then you fast forward thousands of years to today, you obviously are dealing with the psychological frameworks, you're dealing with failure, you're dealing with thousands of years of people's experiences. So now we're raising kids. So when someone comes up to me and says that, even in my own life, I think yes, it's true, you can't do that. Like when they said to you, I could never do that. Obviously it's true. But then the reality is you have to decide what's a stronger force in you.
Yeah.
Yes, dude.
And so, you may not have the psychological framework at the moment to take that risk. You may not have the emotional band. all the stuff that's required to take a major risk or even small risk. Yeah, it might be actually very true. But that moment you have to go, okay, is that a stronger force in my life? Yeah. Or is there another force that I want to be louder?
Come on.
And sometimes that voice is so quiet and the ramifications are there.
Yeah.
And there are no ramifications with doing nothing. And so I think it's true, but I also think they've decided to agree with that truth when there is another truth.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I don't think the point for me would be, oh, that's not true. No, it's true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's real. Like
That's
that is
fair.
your reality. And
Right.
but you have to decide, do you want to stay in that reality? Or do you want to step into another dimension where there is another truth that can be more powerful than this truth?
Yeah.
So for me, that's kind of where my mind goes into that reality.
That's good.
And I know, and when we made our big jump across the country to
Right.
do what we're doing, the amount of people that came up to me and said, "Oh, if you could do it, why can't I do it now?" So some of it's that pioneering maverick, like you
good.
just think, "Oh, wait, the stakes were higher for you, and my stakes are a lot lower.
Yes.
So what's holding me back?" So I
Yeah.
think some of it's giving people permission.
That's right.
But for some people, it's, no, they can't. You're right. But there is another truth available if you want to partner with that.
Yeah.
I am so curious because I love that answer. What do you guys think moves someone from A reality to B reality? From, okay, sure, that's true, but you have this strong force. I love to say to people, you have the wind at your back. You have all the momentum in the world. The God of the universe is on your side. Mm-hmm. So how do people get from accepting this reality, which I think is a subpar existence or less than what you were created for, to now I'm walking with God in a way where I'm fully alive? What do you think that looks like?
I think it's pain or vision is what moves you into the future. If you don't have that, you don't move. You stay. You stay put. And I don't mean physically. You just don't move. You just stay static. And I've seen pain pain is one of the most powerful motivators. Like I've done the biggest decisions in my life because of deep pain.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the challenge then becomes, do I need to keep that pain alive to keep the motivation?
Sure.
I have to learn to move it into another space, psychologically, emotionally, and even spiritually. But pain is powerful. I mean, so as a pastor, I sit with lots of people, and I hear people talk about, their future. Why? I don't know if I'm supposed to, all the same kind of conversation just about their life and future.
Yeah.
And I was with someone kind of recently, and I said, you don't have enough pain and you don't have any vision, so you will actually do nothing. Until you can find enough vision, or you can identify the pain You're just going to stay in this spot, in this conversation a year from now, we're going to have the same conversation.
Yeah.
And so this would probably like 3 years ago. This is someone else. Having this with, like, what are you doing? Like, why are you still there? I don't understand it.
Right.
We're talking probably 8-10 years of conversation.
Wow.
And I finally just said, you are going to do nothing, and just kind of laid it out for him. And within a few months, they said, all right, we're done, we're out. And they made a major transition in life. So I think pain and vision, if you don't have those two,
Yeah.
you don't do anything. You stay put.
That is fascinating.
Yeah, and I don't know that I've painted personally until this moment put pain and vision together in that context. So I appreciate that. Well, let me ask you this then, Eric. Since I love your passion for it. You like lighten up talking about it.
Yeah.
How do you prevent moving from pain to pain? You know, so one pain drives you to the next.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you got to put it like in a different bucket, right? And how do you like? What does that look like?
So I have a friend who mentors me. I'm going to keep his name out of it just for right now, for no real reason other than just whatever.
All good.
But I was sharing with him recently. I said, so there are things I've done in the last 3 years. Not the big move, but what I've done in the big move.
Yeah.
I'm doing it because someone told me I couldn't do it. Like someone told me, I'm like, really?
Bring it on.
And like
I
we're
love
talking
that.
a couple decades, and that's not you. That you can't do this. You don't have it. And like and I realized how much they've psychologically programmed me, or I had let them, if that however that works out.
Right.
So I realized, so I was processing with my friend who's a bit older than me, and I said, I'm finding myself just in this. I'm going to prove them wrong. And he said, no, that's an entrepreneur right there. An entrepreneur is someone that's like, I'm going to prove everybody wrong, that this thing is real.
Right.
He said, the problem is you have to decide you still want to do that thing.
Wow.
And I was like, that's a really good question, because I haven't done my full assessment, but I would say there's at least 2 or 3 things that I'm doing just to prove the voices wrong.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I don't want to do these things anymore.
Right.
So my whole motivation was,
That's interesting.
I'm just going to like put it back and say, told you so.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, so he told me, now you have to decide, don't keep doing those things
Right.
if you don't want to do them anymore.
Right.
But if you want to do them, then great. But if you don't, then you need it. So I don't know if I answered the question, but that's where my brain went to, just like
great.
this proving people wrong. Like that would really is something that there's a lot of things I've done because of that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's just some side thoughts.
I love that.
Super
I love
cool.
they share that.
What are your thoughts there? It looked like you were kicking some stuff around, Stephen.
Honestly, I was really intrigued by that answer. I didn't expect that because I identify with it. And I can't help it, but a lot of great athletes, you learn that's their story. I mean,
gosh.
some of the greatest athletes
good.
in the world. I mean, you
true.
listen to someone like Michael Jordan, the guy's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder.
Still does.
And it's amazing.
To
It's
this
like,
day.
you won, dude. You did it all, and still you could just listen to him. You're like, man, he had a bone to pick, and it was like he had an axe to grind. This guy was going to prove himself, and it drove him to do great things. Of course, he loved the game too. And so as you were talking, I was like trying not to go too far into analytical mode. Like, are there things in my life that I'm doing just to prove people wrong? Because I want to be, purpose driven. I want the things in my life to actually matter to me, that I actually want to do it. But the other thought that I had is a total pivot with a different question that I'm super fascinated to hear from you guys. So the idea of us having ideas that we want to pursue, and of course right now we're talking in the entrepreneurship space, versus God told me to do this. And what is that conversation, that dialectic? What's the tension there that we find in scripture and in experience? Because I think each of us are pretty passionate about this topic, and I think it could be really helpful for our listeners. So Eric, I'm gonna ask you to lead off. I'll let you lead off.
How Eric
and then I know you have
this.
some great thoughts too,
sure.
CJ. So go ahead.
Okay, so a dimension of this for me is I would say this is my personal experience and my own growth in this area, and obviously observing it on the lives of thousands of people. Whenever we put all of our eggs in the basket of God told me to do this, God put this idea in my heart, and that sounds great, especially for a faith person. You're like, oh man, that's what we're supposed to say, and you're taught that, and our theological structure tell us to do that. I would say that is a dimension amongst other dimensions when it comes to ideas. So we have this dimension over here, like, okay, God told me I'm not going to do anything unless God tells me. It's that kind of, which sounds great, it's very spiritual,
Sure.
and each tradition of the faith has its, measure of value of that. The challenge is if you don't do an idea if you don't do an idea, then you excuse yourself out of doing it because God didn't tell you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, you have reduced yourself down to being just really good at obeying, really good at just give me a list of things to do and I'll do it. And you have removed yourself from the potential. And we're all parents. So,
Yes.
I mean, I have adult children. You have young kids.
Yep.
You have a mixture.
A little bit older.
A little bit older. And it would be really awkward and embarrassing if my 22-year-old and my 24-year-old daughters gave me credit for everything.
Yes.
It would be an absolute failure on my part as a dad.
Wow.
Interesting.
So I think there's something that we need to adjust in our thinking, and that's an operation system. That's a paradigm reality. And we were talking about this before the podcast, but I think it kind of comes down to if God had to make every decision for you, then you'll have nothing to give an account for at the end of your life. All you'll be able to say is, I obeyed everything you told me to do.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful. I mean, that obviously, I would say that's very baseline. You definitely want to be able to say that.
For sure.
Yes, definitely.
But when it comes to the reality of like being entrusted with gifts, when it's being entrusted with talent, with skills, when you're being entrusted with something so transcendent, so divine, but all you did with it was obey. So that's why I think that's the dimension, but there's other dimensions. So those are some thoughts I have around that.
I absolutely love that. I'm going to let you go next.
So it drives me crazy when
Go,
people...
go, go.
No, I was done, and then I had to say
It's
one more
great.
thing. It's a huge pet peeve of mine, and the older I get, it's becoming more of a pet peeve. I'm like, stop, and this is going to sound wrong, stop giving God all the credit.
Yeah.
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 Yes, he of course he needs to get credit, but at the same time, it's just actually you. It's okay. It's actually okay to say, this is actually an idea I had. Now, whether God gave it to you or not, we'll find out in eternity.
Sure.
We'll find out.
That's
but in the meantime, just run and just trust it. So I have a green light. It's always on until it turns red. That's just
it.
kind of my philosophy on life.
Yeah.
So that's my final thought.
I love
I
that.
agree with that.
I
I
think
agree
that's
with
like false humility to a degree too. It's like, okay, but you're not owning your part. Like we co-labor with Christ. There's participation, but I'll shut up. Go ahead, CJ.
Go ahead.
Yeah, someone say, no, they do something amazing. You did so good. No, that was all God. My dad taught me, just tell him, that wasn't that good.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So the whole false humility thing is
Yes.
like, no, that was you. That
Yeah.
wasn't that good to
Yes.
tell God that was him.
That is
So
my
anyway.
new answer to that. That's my new response. I take it. I'm stealing it. Thank you,
Dude.
Bill. That's
I
great.
love it. I'd key on what you said at the very end there. I haven't heard you say that before, which is the green light until it's a red light. To me, and I have to be careful, but I went to Bible college and I annoyed the holy heck out of my professors, man, because I wasn't a PK. I really only got serious about Christ my junior year in high school. And boy, did I get serious. Like I really like, it really became real for me. So I'm asking professors in Bible college, and I'm surrounded by PKs. It's an exaggeration, but it feels like the majority of kids at Bible colleges, is at least back in the early 90s, that's how old I am, were PKs. So I'm asking professors things like, can you change God's mind? And they're like, next question. Like they don't want to hear this stuff.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is one of the things I love about this podcast, because we're gonna address some of those elephants in the room, and we already have today. It's super fun, but I look at this as personally, my view, my experience is childlike, and I can't escape, and it haunts me sometimes, usually in a good way, but not always. Jesus's words: unless you become like one of these little kids, you're not going to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I'm like, I want to be that little kid who knows that I want to honor my dad, and I've got a bunch of ways and ideas of how to go do it. And I don't need to feel like he said specifically, thus saith the Lord, you will do X at Y time. It's more just like, I've got this pass, this green light. Here's that phrase, but I love that phrase. I'm going to borrow it, Eric, is to just go.
Yes.
I'll be honest. I don't know if I've said this publicly. Lindsay and I have discussed it privately, but I don't know that Lindsay and I would say that we heard a voice from the Lord, suddenly move to Greenville, South Carolina next month. It's not like that. It wasn't, I'd be careful. It's not like that for me. It was like, this makes sense. We have opportunities with our sons. And from our perspective, not having any more experience than we have with our teenage sons, if we don't go now, we probably shouldn't go. It makes sense for it. It's just a good transition time. If you want to hear our rationale, it was like, this is kind of a good transition time. Our business is really doing well here, and we've always dreamt about doing it in a different part of the country. And the South is like so cool for coffee because there's very little coffee compared to the West, you know, the West Coast especially. So there's our rationale. We've had the time of our life. It's not been easy, but here we are. So was it a thus saith the Lord? We didn't feel him saying no.
Yeah.
Is that a fair answer?
I think it's
but
a great
I look
answer.
at it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you, I mean, it'd be fun to like when someone feels the need to tell you
Yeah.
it was God's idea. Like, okay, the conversation's actually not about that. The conversation about something else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Inside the soul of that person
That's a
or
good
the
point.
mind of that person. So I think that's where the conversation would be great to have, because it's like, why do you feel the need to tell me that God gave you that idea, or it's God this and God that? What are driving you?
Right.
And that right there, if you can deal with that, and I think some of the most confident people know the healthy relationship with God, but they don't feel the need to have to let everyone know it would. So I think that's something that's
So interesting.
yeah. I'm curious.
Yeah. So,
Hit it, Stephen.
gosh, I have so many thoughts, and I love what you said. So that green light language, that is what I tell people all the time. I'm like, I literally, this is how I operate my life. I have the green light.
Yeah.
Until he says no. And that has been fruitful for me in virtually every area of my life. So I love that language. But I literally just had a conversation with the guy the other day. I was at work, and the guy that manages our facility was there, was talking to him. And I was talking about this very topic. It just came up. And he's got 2 kids, one of which is a high schooler.
Yes.
And I said, I was talking to the guy, and I said, man, my kids are young. I have a 1-year-old girl. I have a 3-year-old boy. So they're not, right now, Indy at 3, I pick all of his clothes out. I got to wipe his butt when he goes to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I pick out all of his food. He's heavily reliant on me.
Yeah.
But of course, at 18, if that's still the case, something's really off, right?
This is awkward.
But so what I said to this guy was, I said, what I can't imagine, what excites me is what it will feel like as a parent when my son has adopted the values that I've given him, and with his unique flair, his unique expression, his creativity, his intellect, actualizes that, makes decisions, do things that absolutely blow me away. CJ, I've heard you tell so many stories about your boys and how the kindness that they showed to someone at school. I mean, you'll literally be in tears, and I'm going, that's going to be a cool stage of life. Like, that's incredible. You didn't tell Sawyer to go and minister to that substitute teacher. Sawyer just did it because he's a good man.
Yeah.
And he has your heart, and he has the values that you and Lindsay have instilled in him. And so from my perspective, if we're not making any decisions, we're not maturing.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the pleasure of being a parent, is seeing your kids run with what you've given them and express it in whatever unique way that they see fit. To me, that is beautiful.
Yeah.
That's co-laboring, that's partnership. So those are my thoughts.
That's good.
That is good, man. It's fun, but it's also scary to realize how much freedom we really have.
Wow.
Right? I mean, isn't that the point? It's for freedom we've been set free. I still don't claim to understand that entirely. There's a lot of mystery in that simple phrase, but to me, it's like, whoa, there's a lot. If you really process that line, there's a lot to unpack there. But I'm just going to accept it like a little kid. Like, I am free.
Yeah.
Like, I want to avoid immorality every chance I can.
Sure.
I want to try. I always say immoral, illegal. If it's not either one of those,
I don't want
okay.
it. Yeah.
I don't want those 2 things, but let's run after all this other stuff. There's what drives me is what's at stake. And I know, Eric, you would say this, and certainly Stephen, you'd say this. It's what's at stake is people staying still. People,
Yes.
or worse, going back. The enemy has great victories right now in our culture, and I want to be, from a Maverick, I suppose, perspective, or a pioneer. I want to step into that place, and I need people stepping in that place for me. By the way, when I start to struggle,
So good.
not if, but when, and we want to do that. We want to step in. I mean, again, the opportunities that are in front of us in 2024. Let me talk real quick. Coffee. I love coffee, and I study the industry like a geek. Like, you'd be surprised. I'm not really a coffee geek. Like, I'm not mad if you don't drink a single origin.
You're not a snob.
Whatever. Yeah, it's not so much that. But I don't know if you guys know this, but do you think that the United States is in the top 10 nations of coffee consumers?
Mm-mm.
It is not.
Mm.
Is it in the top 20?
I would guess, yes.
It is not.
It is not
Wow.
in the top 20.
It's in the
Is that
top
right?
30.
Is
And
that
the
right?
last I checked, and I don't have the data right in front of me this minute, but it was about number 24.
Wow.
Wow.
So I think the average person could easily look at coffee, even in South Carolina, but if you're in the West Coast especially, and say, that's like, that market's come and gone, man. That's overdone.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the data, that is not the case.
What's the top two?
I believe it's Norway and Sweden, Italy.
Yeah, Italy would.
Top 2 or 3. I don't know for sure, but they're in that. Norway, I know, was right up in there. Certainly top 5, but I don't recall the
Wow.
exact place. Of course, we're talking per capita, in context.
Sure, yeah.
But
And those winter are long and dark.
so then Alaska
Now I
must
know
be
why.
in there
Yeah.
somewhere. Yeah. But I just want to say as an example for the industry that we get to run in right now, which is we've got nothing but green lights in front of us, even with coffee, which is an industry that a lot of people would assume without knowing more is overdone
Wow.
and already just dried up.
Sure.
Like move on. Like, no, not even close. Not even remotely close.
Interesting.
I love this. Well, as we're closing here, I want to end with an analogy that I keep using.
Sweet.
And that I hope that Mavericks and Pioneers that we are able to accomplish, and that is a really simple one. We want to push as many people off the ledge as possible.
Yes.
We want to see actionable steps, and we want to help motivate you, equip you, encourage you, because there are a lot of dreams that a lot of people have, and I think it's time to start living them.
I do too.
So thank you guys so much for joining us. Eric, we're so grateful that you
The
come and join us.
anti-host.
The anti-host, my
Good
man
job.
coming through. We really appreciate it. Of course, if you're new to the podcast, like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. We're really excited about the future and what's to come.
Thanks for listening to Mavericks and Pioneers podcast, where we empower current and aspiring entrepreneurs to take meaningful action towards their dreams. We'll see you next time.